Welcome to the deep dive. You've shared something you're curious about, and we extract the core knowledge to get you up to speed efficiently. Today, we're tackling Nick Trenton's book, Stop Overthinking: 23 Techniques to Relieve Stress, Stop Negative Spirals, and Calm Your Mind. Sounds like a really practical guide, doesn't it, for, anyone whose inner monologue just won't quit.
Absolutely. And our mission today is really to explore the whole book, zeroing in on those actionable strategies, the helpful perspectives Trenton offers for managing overthinking. We'll try to bring it all to life using the examples and stories from the book itself, make it relatable.
Yeah, because it's so common, isn't it? I mean, we live in this constantly buzzing world, and sometimes your own mind feels like the loudest place. The book really nails it, describing overthinking as this unwanted, relentless, almost self-sabotaging thing. It's like your brain's problem-solving gear gets stuck in overdrive, but you're not actually solving anything.
Exactly. It's spinning its wheels. And Trenton outlines some key signs, flags for when thinking crosses that line into overthinking. He talks about that constant hyper-awareness of your thoughts, even thinking about your thinking meta-thought, and that a persistent feeling that you need to control them.
Right, and that distress you feel from just random thoughts popping up, like worries out of nowhere. The book also points out how, in a crisis, overthinkers often turn inward, right? They start seeing their own thoughts as the main problem, which ironically just makes making decisions even harder. It's like trying to untangle a knot by yanking on it.
And then there's the constant worry, those negative thought loops that just play over and over again. But Trenton makes a really crucial distinction. He says, look, some of these things being aware, questioning can be good in moderation. Overthinking is when it becomes excessive, unhelpful.
So thought itself isn't the bad guy.
Not at all. It's the uncontrolled overthinking that undermines our well-being.
Okay, so let's dive deeper then. Where does this actually start? According to Trenton, what are the roots?
Well, what's really interesting is the book argues that the things we think we're overthinking about, they're often not the real root cause. He gives this great example of James, who's totally consumed with worry about a mole on his back.
Right, I remember that. But the book suggests his worry about the mole wasn't really about the mole, was it?
Exactly. It was more like a symptom, a manifestation of deeper stuff, unresolved things from his past, maybe guilt, self-doubt. The mole was just the focus point, the visible worry.
Like a red herring. So you think fixing the mole worry will help, but then something else just pops up.
Precisely. So the book's core idea, really, is that anxiety is often the underlying driver, the why, and overthinking is the how it manifests, which naturally leads to asking, okay, where does the anxiety come from? And the book looks at that through the classic nature versus nurture lens.
Let's start with nature then, genetics. The book mentions a 2019 study, something about chromosome 9.
Yeah, in molecular psychiatry. It suggested a potential genetic link. But, and this is key, having those genes doesn't automatically mean you'll have anxiety.
Ah, okay. So it's not destiny.
Not at all. The heritability rate mentioned is actually pretty low, around 26%. Genetics plays a part, sure, but maybe a smaller part than we assume. Plus, the book points out how tricky it is to separate true genetic influence from, learned behaviors or early experiences we pick up from our parents. It's complex.
Which brings us neatly to nurture, the environment. The book really stresses how much life events and stressors impact anxiety.
Definitely. And it even differentiates between types of stress. There's eustress, that kind of motivating pressure, versus negative stress that just drains you. And then there's hypostress too, stress from being understimulated, believe it or not. We need that sweet spot of engagement.
And there's a clear difference between stress and anxiety, right? The book mentions Dr. Sarah Edelman on this.
Yes. Stress is the external pressure, the demanding job, the traffic jam. Anxiety is our internal reaction to that pressure. Same storm, different boats kind of thing.
Okay. And the book lists tons of examples of these stressors.
Oh, yeah. Work pressure, family demands, relationship issues, the news cycle, politics, climate change, even little things like noisy neighbors. It also mentions research linking major depression and generalized anxiety disorder to big traumatic events or childhood difficulties.
It's not just the big stuff either, is it? The book talks about our immediate surroundings, home, work.
Right. Things like clutter, bad lighting, weird smells, constant noise, even colors. They can all subtly crank up our anxiety levels.
Makes you think about your workspace, doesn't it? How a cluttered desk might actually be stressing you out more than you realize.
Totally. Small environmental changes can sometimes have a surprisingly big impact on how you feel internally.
And the third piece of the puzzle, according to the book, is our own behavior and attitudes. This is where we have more direct control.
Exactly. This is about our habits, how we see ourselves, the boundaries we set or don't set. It really sets the stage for the what to do about it part, emphasizing that understanding these factors gives us leverage.
Okay, so we've looked at where it might come from. Now, the book really hammers home why we need to tackle overthinking. It's not just annoying thoughts.
Not even close. The book is clear. Overthinking and worry have serious, wide-ranging negative effects. Physiological, mental, emotional, social, even spiritual, you could argue.
Let's talk physical first. The HPA axis, fight or flight, that whole stress response system.
Right. It's designed for short-term threats like, escaping a predator. But chronic overthinking keeps that system switched on constantly.
And the fallout from that.
Well, the book lists quite a few physical symptoms. Racing heart, headaches, nausea, muscle tension, just feeling exhausted all the time, dry mouth, dizziness, breathing faster, aching muscles, trembling, sweating, disturbed digestion, a weaker immune system, memory problems even. And long-term, you can contribute to serious stuff like cardiovascular disease, insomnia, hormonal issues. It's a stark reminder of that mind-body link.
It really is sobering. And the mental and psychological side, it's just as bad.
Oh, definitely. The book talks about mental exhaustion, feeling constantly on edge, nervousness, irritability, trouble concentrating, zero motivation, changes in appetite or libido, nightmares. It can also feed into depression, feeling totally out of control, apathy. It's like your mental battery is just constantly drained.
And it becomes a vicious cycle, doesn't it? Stress makes you think negatively, which lowers confidence, which makes you more stressed.
Precisely. You get trapped in that negative spiral.
And it doesn't just affect us internally, it spills out into our lives.
Absolutely. The book covers the social and environmental impacts, too. Strained relationships, poor work performance because you can't focus, being irritable with people, withdrawing socially. It can even lead to unhealthy coping mechanisms like addictive behaviors. You start losing the joy and meaning in life.
And it's all connected. The book gives that example of cortisol, the stress hormone. Overthinking releases it, which makes you more anxious, which leads to more overthinking.
And maybe poor choices like skipping sleep or eating junk food, which just fuels the fire. It's a self-feeding loop.
Yeah. And the book makes that point again. Stress itself might be neutral. It's our interpretation, fueled by overthinking, that turns manageable stress into something overwhelming.
Exactly. It magnifies everything.
So the big takeaway here is overthinking isn't just how some people are. It's a destructive pattern.
But, and this is the hopeful part the book emphasizes, it's a pattern we can change. We can choose to interrupt it. Stress happens, yes, but being consumed by overthinking doesn't have to.
That's encouraging. It means we can learn to manage it.
Absolutely. The book frames it as retraining your brain, adopting healthier perspectives, building resilience. And that brings us to the practical stuff, the actual techniques.
All right, let's get into the toolkit. The book starts with a core framework, the 4 A's of stress management. Can you break those down?
Sure. It's avoid, alter, accept, and adapt. A simple framework to approach pretty much any stressful situation. The first one, avoid, sounds simple, but it's about consciously identifying stressors you can just walk away from, things that aren't necessary.
Like the example of hating crowded grocery stores on Saturday morning.
Exactly. Just change your shopping time. Avoid the stressor entirely. It's about being strategic.
And it applies to people too, right? Limiting contact with someone who consistently drains you.
Right. Or changing how you interact. It's about saying no thoughtfully to things that deplete your energy without adding value. Not avoiding challenges, but avoiding unnecessary drains.
Okay, then alter. This is about actively changing the situation itself.
Yeah, taking initiative, like asking builders to pause the noise for a bit, or clearly telling someone in a relationship what you need. Being assertive. Even small alterations help, like listening to an audiobook on a stressful commute. It changes the experience.
Got it. Next is accept. This one feels harder sometimes. It's not liking it, but acknowledging it.
Exactly. It's not approval. It's acknowledging reality, especially things you can't control. The book talks about forgiveness here, letting go of resentment for your own sake. It's also about reframing. Instead of, I failed, maybe it's, I made a mistake, what can I learn? Changing the internal narrative makes a huge difference.
And the last A is adapt. Changing our reaction when we can't change the situation.
Right. Building internal resilience. The book uses the example of a dismissive colleague. You might not change them, but you can adapt.
Oh.
By communicating your concerns professionally, setting boundaries, maybe accepting that's just how they are generally, and crucially building your own confidence so their comments don't hit so hard.
That's a really useful framework. Okay, moving on to specific techniques. Stress diaries and journals. Why are they helpful?
Their main power is awareness. When you're stressed, it can feel like this big, vague cloud. A diary helps you pinpoint specific triggers and your typical reactions. You become a detective of your own stress. What sets it off? How do I usually respond? Seeing patterns is the first step to changing them.
So what should you track? Time, date.
Yep. Time, date, your stress level, maybe a 1-10 scale, or just words like tense, overwhelmed, physical symptoms, what just happened, what you think caused it, how you reacted, and what the outcome was.
The book had that example about the message concerning Dad's surgery, right? Tracking helped the person understand their anxiety spike.
Exactly. And beyond stress diaries, the book mentions other journaling types too. Gratitude journals, emotional release, or dump journaling, bullet journals for organization.
But it also warns about perfectionism, right? Journaling shouldn't become another stressor.
Precisely. And it advises ending on a positive or grounding note, not leaving yourself stewing in anxiety.
Okay, another technique for immediate relief. The 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique sounds very practical for in-the-moment panic.
It really is. The idea is that when we're anxious, we're often lost in the past or future. This pulls you right back to the present by engaging your senses. You just intentionally notice 5 things you see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you hear, 2 things you smell, 1 thing you taste. It interrupts the thought spiral and anchors you. Simple but effective.
I like that. Now, narrative therapy and externalization, this sounds interesting. It's about the stories we tell ourselves.
Exactly. It looks at how we shape our experiences into narratives and how we can consciously rewrite those stories for empowerment. A core idea is separating the person from the problem. That's where externalization comes in. Instead of I'm an overthinker, you frame it as overthinking is a problem I'm dealing with.
Creates distance. You're not defined by the problem.
Right. It gives you agency. You're the author of your story. The book also mentions deconstruction, breaking down huge, overwhelming problems into smaller, story-like steps.
Like asking what happened next to make it sequential.
Yeah, or focusing on just one piece at a time. Looking at it from different angles, it makes overwhelming things feel more manageable.
Moving on, the book really emphasizes prioritizing rest and relaxation, not just as a reward, but as essential.
Absolutely essential. They're resources, not afterthoughts. Vital for managing stress. The book pushes for actually scheduling enjoyable things, taking real breaks. It uses Susie as an example, someone who always puts work and family first, and her own well-being last on the list. So many of us do that.
Fealty. Which leads nicely into effective time management. The book says it's more than just juggling tasks.
Much more. It's about making things concrete lists, schedules, breaking big tasks down, focusing on the process, not just the outcome, learning to say no, aligning actions with bigger goals.
And it introduces the urgent important matrix, the 4 quadrants.
Yes. Do, schedule, delegate, delete. A great tool for prioritizing.
Yeah.
It also touches on different time management styles like the procrastinator or the firefighter and offers tailored tips for each.
Then there's goal setting, specifically SMART goals. Specific, measurable.
Attainable, relevant, time-bound. Right. Cuts through the chaos, gives focus. The book contrasts the vague goal like be healthier with the smart one like eat fruit and veg with dinner daily for a month. Much clearer.
And the Kanban method, that sounds more like project management?
It can be used personally, too. It's a visual system to manage workflow. Visualize tasks, limit work in progress so you don't multitask like crazy, manage the flow, make rules clear, and keep improving. The book uses meal prep and grocery shopping as an everyday example of how Kanban can streamline things and reduce stress.
Interesting. And finally, time blocking. Setting aside specific times for specific tasks.
Yep, like scheduling your most important work during your peak energy time and maybe blocking out time later for emails or reactive stuff. It adds structure.
Wow, okay. That's a solid set of tools for ongoing management. Now, what about techniques for immediate relief and changing those deeper thought patterns?
Right, this section starts with autogenic training. It's a self-relaxation technique using verbal cues and focusing on bodily sensations, calm, warmth, heaviness, heartbeat, breath, coolness in the forehead. It aims to give you more conscious control over things usually involuntary. It takes practice, though. And the book does warn people with certain health conditions, diabetes, heart issues, to check with a doctor first.
Good caution. Then there's guided imagery and visualization, using your mind to create relaxing scenes.
Exactly. Tapping into that mind-body connection. You practice creating a detailed, calming, mental happy place you can go to. Engage all your senses in the visualization. The book even mentions imagining a wise guide for support. It's a bit like self-hypnosis, really.
And progressive muscle relaxation, tensing and releasing muscles.
Yes. based on the idea that physical relaxation promotes mental relaxation. You systematically tense, then release different muscle groups, fingers, arms, shoulders, face, etc., paying attention to the feeling of release. The book says it can help with sleep, pain, even migraines, not just anxiety.
Okay, now shifting to the thought patterns themselves. Unraveling cognitive distortions. What are these distortions again?
Basically, they're inaccurate, unhelpful ways of thinking that fuel anxiety. Mental filters that twist reality, usually negatively.
All or nothing thinking, black and white, no gray areas.
That's a classic one. Or overgeneralization, one bad date means I'll always be alone. Or discounting the positive, ignoring compliments, but dwelling on criticism.
Yeah.
Also, externalizing, blaming yourself or others unfairly. And emotional reasoning, I feel stupid, so I must be stupid.
Okay, I recognize some of those. So how do we tackle them? Cognitive restructuring.
Yes, it's about questioning your thoughts like a scientist. Is this really true? Where's the evidence? You identify the trigger, the automatic negative thought, the resulting feeling, then you challenge the thought. Evidence for. Evidence against. What's a more balanced, realistic alternative? The book uses that example of bumping into your boss when rushed. Instead of assuming he thinks I'm incompetent, you find evidence against that and generate alternatives like, he was probably just busy too.
That structured approach seems really helpful. The book also talks about using CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, to clean up self-talk. How does that link?
Well, self-talk is that inner voice, right? Often negative self-talk stems from deeper core beliefs. I'm not good enough. I have to be perfect. CBT tools like the ABC model or thought records help you trace that surface-level negative self-talk back to its roots, back to those core beliefs and the emotions tied to them, like shame or self-doubt. And the book points out that finding healthier alternatives often involves bringing in self-compassion, not just logic.
And self-scripting follows on from that, creating positive affirmations.
Exactly. You intentionally create and repeat positive statements about yourself to actively counteract the negative chatter, especially in tough moments. Write them down, post them up. The goal isn't zero stress, but a more balanced, supportive inner dialogue.
Makes sense. And the book wraps up this section by revisiting those 5 core attitudes as guides. Remind us.
Sure. 1, focus on what you can control, not what you can't. 2, focus on what you can do, not what you can't. 3, focus on what you have, gratitude, not what you don't. 4, focus on the present, not the past or future. 5, focus on what you need, not just what you want.
Great reminders. And there was one more technique mentioned briefly, emotion regulation via the opposite action.
Yeah, it's about identifying an unwanted emotion and the urge it creates, and then consciously doing the opposite to find balance. Like if anxiety makes you want to isolate, you intentionally reach out.
Wow. Okay, that really covers a huge amount of ground from Nick Trenton's Stop Overthinking. It feels like a genuinely comprehensive toolkit.
It really does. And I think the main takeaway, the hopeful message, is that overthinking might feel automatic, but the book presents it as a learned pattern. And learned patterns can be unlearned. With awareness, consistent effort, applying these techniques, cultivating these attitudes, change is possible.
So, for everyone listening, maybe take a moment to think. Which of these techniques or attitudes really struck a chord with you? Maybe pick 1 or 2 to experiment with this week.
And here's a final thought to chew on. Building on the book's emphasis on personal agency, what's one small shift in focus you could make today? Maybe shifting from uncontrollable to controllable, from what you can't do to what you can do, needs versus wants, past future versus present. What small shift could start interrupting that overthinking cycle for you?
That's a great question to leave people with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We really appreciate you sharing your curiosity, and definitely feel free to share your own experiences with overthinking or these techniques. We'd love to hear them. Until next time.